We seem to be at this weird stage in gaming where developers are in what's almost like a modernization arms race, with new titles getting pushed further and further into more futuristic settings. I personally have always been a bigger fan of the more historical type games, you know, Black Ops 1, which was set in the Vietnam War, Battlefield 1942, and even further back you get medieval warfare games. Although the entire multiplayer medieval genre has been pretty neglected for a while now. Well, it's kind of always been neglected in the gaming industry. Occasionally we get some, you know, pretty decent titles that are okay, like Chivalry. You know, they're fun to mess around in with friends, but we almost never see a true AAA multiplayer game set in medieval era. That is, until For Honor. For Honor, which is being released sometime in 2016, not exactly sure when, I don't think they've announced the date yet, is one of the first AAA medieval games I think I've ever seen, and I really loved everything about it, from combat to graphics. It just beats every other attempt at medieval warfare that I've tried out. Now, at Gamescom, they let a total of 8 people in the world record a gameplay with it, and wouldn't you know it, I was one of them, and even luckier, in that single game that we were allowed to record, I actually went 16 for 2, 16 kills and 2 deaths, but... and no one's going to believe me when I say this, in true Musalk luck style, my recording from that game actually got corrupted. So I've been sent this gameplay instead, which I believe shows one of the developers playing instead of me. But just as proof, here's a screenshot from someone else's gameplay video that shows me standing proudly at the top of the scoreboard. Fear my sword of power. But anyway, enough about me and my insecurities, let's talk about the actual game. So in this game here, we're playing a mode called Dominion, which is 4v4 with 2 teams, 3 control points, and a buttload of NPCs fighting in the middle. The combat system is where this game really stands out for me. Most medieval games do a lot of things really well. They capture the massive scale of medieval warfare and create this great atmosphere that really kind of feels like you're playing in the middle of this massive war. But almost all of them fall at one massive hurdle, which is melee combat. It's messy, it's ugly, and most sword-based fighting games seem to descend into this flurry of button-mashing madness, which really lowers the entire skill cap of most of these games and just makes the entire experience a bit less satisfying. For Honor is the first medieval warfare game I've played that makes the combat feel really skillful and tactical, and it has some of the most satisfying animation and sound design I think I've ever seen. When fighting, you have to constantly switch between these 3 stances, and if you want to block, you mirror the stance of the enemy, or to attack, you need to hit from an angle that the enemy isn't defending from. This creates this fantastic and pretty intense fighting, which, win or lose, were always a great part to be of, because you almost always feel like the best player won. It's medieval combat without the frustration of being killed by some button-mashing idiot. You can also use a ton of other moves, such as shoving, kicking, and grabbing to disrupt the fight, or even push people off battlements to their death. If you can stay alive long enough and kill enough enemies, you'll also have the opportunity to earn some pretty cool perks. The lower tier ones are a bit more basic, which kind of let you heal yourself and give surrounding NPCs a bit of an attack boost. But eventually, if you go on a big enough streak, you can call in a catapult meteor-like strike and obliterate anyone that it lands on. Sadly, the person playing in this gameplay didn't get any of those, but when I played, I managed to earn about 3 throughout the entire game, and it was hilarious watching 2 or 3 enemies gang up on one of my teammates, who I just tell to stand still, and then I would call down this massive meteor explosion on top and just wipe them all out. If I had one major criticism of the game right now, though, it would probably be the comeback mechanic that exists. In my game that I played, despite going 16 for 2 and our team reaching the score limit first, the other team was still able to come back, even when we had this pretty insane point lead, and they actually ended up winning the game while we lost. Now, on one hand, I like games that have this kind of comeback mechanic because it makes everything a lot more intense, and you know that the battle isn't over until it's over. But if it's taken too far, it can lead to more frustration than anything, and I played about 4 games total at Gamescom, and in 3 of them, one team would reach the score limit first by a pretty large margin, but end up losing regardless, just because the comeback mechanic at the moment seems to be a little bit too generous towards the losing team. Obviously though, the game is still in pre-alpha, and this is some of the only raw gameplay footage that exists in the world right now, and things like comeback mechanics are obviously something that I'm sure they're going to tweak throughout the development process. It's also going to be interesting to see how they plan on taking the game further through game modes and character progression, because as fun as this mode was, it's obviously not enough to keep up a long-term player base, so I'll be interested to see what they do there. I'm personally maybe hoping they add in some kind of larger player v player fights with, like, you know, 12v12 teams, something more akin to Chivalry, but maybe that's just not what the game's built for. I guess we'll have to see there. This is just something I thought I'd share with you today, because if you're a fan of medieval games like me, it is definitely a title to keep your eyes on.